I'm here with the great Paul Sullivan from Wayland, Massachusetts. Paul is one of my favorite idols. He's a great humanitarian. He reminds me of the great Nelson Mandela. Great human being. Paul, I've always wanted to interview you. I've been thinking about this for a very, very long time. Today is my opportunity.
I don't know why, Del, you want to interview me, but let's do it.
I'm glad you granted me the opportunity. Paul, about 5 years ago, I was talking to you, and you're telling me the story about the metal racket, not the graphite, way before graphite racket. Could you tell me about the story again? That was a very intriguing story that the world should know about.
It's interesting, I guess, Del. It was actually the first aluminum racket ever made, and it was the precursor to all the rackets you see today.
Yeah.
So this is in the late 60s, and I was still playing at the time.
Yes.
And I actually was sitting on a porch at Longwood, the tennis club.
Longwood Tennis Club in Brooklyn.
Yeah. And watching some guys out there. One guy had a racket, it was the T2000, which is a steel racket.
That's a racket that Jimmy Carter uses?
He was one of the only guys that could actually use it. He used to, the way he played was sort of like a trampoline into the racket and throwing it. He was really good with it, racket. But other than he was really tough for people to play with it. So anyway, I just said to a friend who was also he was a designer, mechanical designer, who was sitting with me, and I said, "See, we ought to do better than that, Peter." And so we started working on a racket, and not too far off, raised a little money.
So how long did you guys take from one prototype to another prototype? How long did How long did it take to get from one prototype to another prototype?
The first thing was just a piece of metal, a piece of aluminum, and got a feel for where we could go from there. I'd say it was about 3 months before I had one that felt pretty good. A lot of problems as we went along, but we overcame them pretty quickly. I ended up, I'd say, 5 months later from the start, being able to have the confidence to go out and sell them.
So how were you able to market the racket to the tennis world? Because back then the racket was wooden racket. How were you able to market it?
Yeah, wooden rackets are really the big main, all the rackets. I was in the tennis clothing business at the time, had been for years. And so I had a lot of contacts.
Yes.
And at that time I went to a show, which was basically a clothing, apparel, and also a sporting goods show. And I displayed the racket. And I actually sold 50,000 rackets the first day.
50,000 racket.
That's an enormous total at that day, at that time.
So you have a purchase order for 50,000 rackets.
Yeah.
So who were some of these buyers?
Well, literally, you go back a bit. I only had 10 prototypes, period. No other than that. So I was selling 50,000, but I had 10. So we had an issue of how to deliver these things. But the next day, things changed, and the show's still going on. And I got a visit from a person at Spalding, A.G. Spalding Company.
Yes, Spalding, yeah, Spalding that makes rackets and tennis balls and all
Exactly.
these sports equipment.
And I had been selling them tennis clothing previously. And they came to me, this guy came to me and said, the president of Spalding would like to meet you. And I said, sure. So we met in the room that night, and he made an offer to take it over with a royalty agreement that was hard to refuse. And so we didn't refuse it, and we handed it over to them, and